Hello, I'm Gigi Reader, and today I will be reviewing the book The Return of King Lillian by Susie Plaxton. This book starts out with a little girl who has run away from home. She turns she runs into a forest called the Forest of Forgetfulness. Because she has ran away and into the Forest of Forgetfulness, she cannot remember her name or where she's from. An old lady who lives in a cottage in the woods, who she comes to know as Mad Aunt Harriet, raises her to a young woman. The lady never gives the girl a name, but only calls her little girl. One day, the girl gets a message from a well she plays near. The well tells her, "Leave the forest, go home now." When she goes back to the cottage and she tells Mad Aunt Harriet about the message from the well, Aunt Harriet tells her, "You must leave here first thing tomorrow morning." When the girl protests, Aunt Harriet says, "Don't be a fool, child. Destiny is calling, and by gum you shall answer with head high, shoes shine, and bells on." So Mad Aunt Harriet prepared the girl for her journey out into the world to find her destiny. I have to add, too, that when Mad Aunt Harriet found the girl in the woods, she only found a purple hat on her and a small music box. So she packed that with her to go, but also gave the girl three magical gifts before she went off. These three gifts was: one, a swift knife that folded out into a magic key that could unlock any lock. Second, a multicolored pouch of infinite coinage. The pouch could never go empty. She would have an endless amount of gold coins. Third, a scarlet velvet traveling cape. The cape could instantly turn into the most glamorous outfit or gown. It could also turn into a sleeping hammock, a bed, or traveling sack. Now she had everything she needed to travel. Upon leaving the forest, as she reached the edge, and before she stepped onto the road, she came upon a white doe, a deer. It was the same doe she had seen the day she first ran into the forest. She spoke to the doe and said, "Why, hello, you." The doe spoke back and said, "Hello, Lillian." "Lillian," she said to herself. "Why, that's no word. That's my name." Suddenly she remembered her name, and she stepped out onto the road. The forest of forgetfulness now disappeared and evaporated behind her. Through Lillian's travels from town to town, she made friends with a horse named Hank. She rescued Hank from two mean men who used him in a horse show. Hank was a magical horse who could change colors and also turn into invisible when he wanted. He also talked to Lillian because she had the ability to speak to animals. The two men, Higgs and Boggs, used Hank as a sideshow horse. They charged people to see him, but they abused him by nearly starving him and chained him with shackles and iron around his neck and making him walk around and around the pole. Lillian tried to buy the horse from Higgs and Boggs, but they locked her in a shed and robbed her of her magical gold purse. The night they locked her up, she remembered her magical swift knife, and told she folded out the magical key on it, and that could lock any lock. So when Higgs and Boggs fell asleep, she unlocked the chains on the shed door she was locked in and unlocked Hank from his chains, and they both ran away together. So her and Hank travel from town to town together, but Hank isn't always with her the entire time. Sometimes he disappears and goes off on his own and just appears again when Lillian really needs him. Now, to make my summary of this book short, I'll just say that Lillian did go through some trials and tribulations through the next maybe 5 chapters, and it was getting tiresome to read at first. It even got me irritated when she finally decides on page 191 that she would give up on her finding who she was and where she was from. I was so done when I read that. In her words, to quote her, she said, "I have eternally given up on my search for home." I thought, no way. No, Miss Sam Plaxton, the author, did not have me read all the way up to page 191 to have Miss Lillian say she's given up on finding her home. The whole when the whole plot of the story was for her to find her home. But do not fear, this book gets good on page 205. Yes, this is where it gets real. This is also where she finds out who she is and where she's from, because in this chapter, where she comes across the fairies. All right, Lillian likes to write poems when the feeling strikes her, but lo and behold, she's out of ink. So she and Hank are walking down this dirt road together to the next town, and off from the road, she spots a store. The way the store pops up and out of nowhere, Hank immediately identifies the store to be a fairy store, and they are in fairy territory. Hank warns her not to go into fairyland. So we find out that according to Miss Susie Plaxton, fairies are the straight up gangster of fairy tale land. I'm telling you. I mean, we know there's queens and kings and princesses and emperors and witches and warlocks and wizards and dwarves and elves and pixies, but we find that fairies are the thugs of make believe land, to hear Miss Susie Plaxton tell it. We find out why. When Lillian sees the store, Hank says, "Look, Lillian, you don't want to wander off into fairyland. You know how they get down. It's dangerous." He reminds her that wandering into fairyland is like going into the hood. He lets her know he heard of folks disappearing forever once they cross over into the land of fairy. And to quote Hank, he says, "Or if they do come out, they have the head of a goat, or they dance until they die, or other such like life-disturbing afflictions." Period, point blank. Then Hank says, "If I were you, I wouldn't go. If I, if you do go, you're going by yourself, because I'm not going in there. I'll wait right here on the road for you." So Lillian says, "Bump that. I'll take my chances because I need some ink to write my poem." So Hank says, "Go ahead with your bad self." So she proceeds to walk off the road through some shrubbery up a walkway to the store. But the store seems to move further away as she walks toward it. So right away she seems to get the fairies got game. So she says out loud, "Oh, please, I just want to enter your store." So finally the store stops moving. She walks into the store and doesn't see anyone working inside, but she feels as if the fairies are watching her. So she says, "I don't want no smoke. I just come here to buy some ink, and I'm going to put a coin down right down here on the counter." So she places the coin on the counter and walks back. She doesn't see any ink in the store until she turns around, and suddenly out of nowhere there's a tall stack of tiny bottles of ink right before her. At the very top of the stack is her favorite color, purple. She could grab the closest bottle, but she has to have the purple ink at the very top. So she reaches for it and tumbles into the entire stack. Suddenly, as she falls into the stack, all the ink bottles open up and pours all over her, one by one. She knows it's the fairies, so she laughs it off, because this is what fairies do. They like to play games. So then there's a sudden flood of ink that pushes her out of the store, onto the steps, and onto the ground. She, of course, laughs it off because, again, she don't want no smoke from these fairies. So then, all of a sudden, they turn her into a boulder. That's right, they turn her into a rock. So she laughs it off and says, "Oh, wow, this is nice. I've never been a rock before." So then they turn her into a rabbit. And then she runs and runs and says, "Wow, this is fun. I've never been a rabbit." So then they turn her into a red oak tree, and she plays along with these fairies and say, "Oh, okay, cool. I'm an oak tree. This is my favorite tree." So now she hears the fairies all laughing, and they turn her back into herself, and she's sitting there in the dirt, stunned and shocked. So finally, the fairies appear to her laughing. Good for Lillian. They are amused at her. Just a ritual type of thing fairies do before they're about to mess somebody up. So the fairies get an idea. They say, let's bring her to the Empress. They go on to say that, let's bring her to the Empress. They go on to say that maybe it'll cheer the Empress up. They claim the Empress needs cheering up after having to turn her best friend Siegfried into a hamster. I mean, these fairies straight up gangster. They say this one will make her laugh. She's sparky. So the next thing you know, Lillian knows she's sitting in a high back chair in the center of an opulent room, all ivory and golden, seated across from no one other than the Empress of Fairyland, throned and crowned and sublimely sparkling. So upon meeting the Fairyland the Fairyland Empress, she notices that all the fairies are silent. Lillian feels she's expected to entertain the Empress, so she proceeds to pull out her music box and sings for the Empress. The Empress is impressed. Upon seeing the music box, the Empress takes it into her long, elegant hands. Then she asks Lillian, "Where'd you get this, mortal?" Upon her asking, Lillian started to get nervous, but told her, "I don't know, Your Highness. All I know is that when I was a kid, I was somehow wandered into the forest of forgetfulness, and I was raised there. I left the forest to find my true home, but I never found it. So I've been a world traveler ever since, but the music box has been with me all the time. It was found on me the night I was found in the forest." So the Empress Fairy proceeds to tell her, "This is fairy made. Did you know this, mortal?" The Empress is shocked. Lillian sings a song from the music box for her, and all the fairies start to cry. They are so moved. Then suddenly the Empress places her hand on Lillian's head and says, "We thought you were dead, my dear. How clever of you not to be." The next thing Lillian knows, she's laying on big pillows and cushions. Her feet are being washed, oiled, and massaged. Her toenails are being painted gold. Seems like the fairies are living ghetto fabulous. These fairies comb and comb her hair. Then, lo and behold, the Empress begins to tell Lillian the story of who she is. Like I said from the beginning, these fairies are like gangsters. They are scary at first, but cool people when you get to know them, especially when they find out your family, and they do find out that Lillian is family. This is how the story goes on who Lillian is. The Empress begins by saying, "Let's see now. You are the daughter of Liliana. She was my 6,422nd cousin. See, I told y'all they were from the hood. Everybody got a lot of cousins in the hood." So the Empress continues, "Yes, she was only half fairy, mind you, on account of her mother, and she ran off and married that fool who was your father, the king of something somewhere. We all warned her, but she was in love. You know how that is." So upon learning all of this, how she was the Empress's 6,422nd cousin, she met the rest of her fairy cousins. She continues with her conversation with Lily and says, "Oh, your mother was so lovely, but oh wait, I could have sworn." Then she yells for her Lillian's cousins, "Albertrina, come here." So Albertrina appears out of nowhere, shimmering in 1,000 shades of pink, looking nervous. See y'all, 1,000 shades of pink. They even dress in ghetto fabulous. The Empress says, "Was it you or was it your sister who was assigned to look in on Liliana's baby? She is your 448th cousin, you know." Albertrina is beside herself. She just rolls her eyes and says, "I have so many cousins, your master. Oh, your majesty, oh wait, that's right. I asked Ermelinda to look in on her. Remember Ermelinda?" Then Ermelinda appears in her fabulous iridescent lavender outfit and hopping mad. You did not ask me. I know you would say that you asked me when you never once." Then a third fairy, glimmering in green, appears and interjects, "If I may I just say that I personally reminded both of them 3 times, your majesty." Then all the fairies chime in. "You lie, Catronetta. You be quiet, Catronetta. 3 times?" So Lillian has met her cousins, Albertrina, Ermelinda, and Catronetta. They all gotta be from the hood. The Empress just shakes her head and dismisses all of them. She turns to Lillian and says, "You were forgotten. No matter. You managed quite well. We are impressed by you, Lillian of everywhere." So Lillian is excited now. She has just found out she's the daughter of a king, but it's sort of bittersweet when the fairy Empress continues. The Empress goes on to tell Lillian that her father, the king, was insistent upon having a boy to inherit the throne. But your mother gave birth to you, so the fool refused to speak to her or even look at either of you ever again. And soon after you were born, Liliana died of a broken heart. That was her music box, and that was her favorite song. The Empress went on to tell Lillian that she was from where she was from and the name of the kingdom. And the name of the kingdom was the biggest and the best city in the history of the whole wide world. Such a filthy gray place, she said, so provincial. So, anyway, a few chapters later, on page 223, Lillian reflects on her life and decides since her father, who was a foolish king who'd only have a boy for an heir, and her mother, who died of heartbreak, and she was a cast off princess. Yes, I suppose I must have run away because I was so unwanted and despised. So she goes on in her mind how she missed the force of forgetfulness and her mad Aunt Harriet. Then she thought of being fairy blood and related to royalty, but royalty had cast her off, and she decided she doesn't want anything to do with the people who cast her out of the city she was from. To quote her, she says, "I do not remember or miss that ugly city with the pompous name, and I know that it certainly does not miss me. And I assume the king has remarried long ago and has all the sons he wants by now, which suits me just fine. I have no use for a father who has no use for me, nor do I need to be for entry into some unappealing place just to say this is where I was born. And where I was born is not where I'm going. My true home will be the whole wide world, where I'm most happy and where I always feel most welcome." So there it is. She's given up on any thought of finding her father or going back to the kingdom where she was from. So anyway, at some point Lillian meets a man and she falls in love. The man's name is Donovan, and suddenly her life changes in a whole different turn of events. Donovan was a soldier who was badly wounded in a war. Is the war he was in just so happened was started by the man who gained control of her father's kingdom. She finds out through Donovan that her father did not remarry or have any other kids. In fact, the man who took over the kingdom had her father locked away in the dungeon of the castle. So now she has a personal vendetta to take her father's kingdom back. Unfortunately, this whole story takes a sad turn when one night Donovan is killed before she can come up with a plan to attack her father's enemy. Somehow, the man who took over her father's kingdom heard she was planning an attack, found out where she and Donovan were living, and sent 3 men to attack them as they were walking along the seashore. Donovan died defending her. He killed the 2 of the men, and she killed the last one that wounded Donovan. I didn't know. I didn't expect a fairy tale book to take such a dark turn, but anyway, it does have a happy ending when she goes to reclaim her father's kingdom and becomes King Lillian. All of this is after all this, I give this book 4 out of 5 stars. It was really good reading up until the sad love story part of the book. I really would love for Miss Susie Plaxton to write an entire series of books and sequels based on those gangsta ass fairies. I mean, can you imagine what a story would be with the fairy empress and all of Lillian's 448 cousins, Albertrina, Ermelinda, Catronetta, and the rest of them? That would be out cold. Remember, y'all, to quote Hank, you could end up with the head of a goat messing with these fairies, or they could make you dance till you die. I mean, that would be. I mean, maybe they could meet up with some elves or fairies, and they had beef with. and get it on the popping, or doors could trespass on the fairies' territory, and it would be on. Overall, I enjoyed the book. Well, thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe.